Welcome, everybody. This is Mapping Your Summit with Colorado 14ers Initiative. My name is Matt, and I'm really excited to be sharing the stage today with Brian from the Colorado 14ers Initiative.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm Matt Madick. I am a marketing manager on the onX Backcountry team. I live in Carbondale, Colorado, and just love getting outside with my puppy, as you can see, and exploring a lot of different mountains and peaks and valleys and deserts. So that's why I love this job, is I get to kind of talk about them for a living. And Brian, you want to give a quick intro?
That's me. Yeah. Development and Communications Manager with Colorado 14ers Initiative. I started here full-time in 2015. My responsibilities include assisting in our fundraising. So I write anywhere from probably 20 to 30 grants every year. I run all of our communications channels, so social media, help YouTube video content that we create, email newsletters. And then in the summer months, as I just was this week, I get to work on a research program where we install infrared trail counters that monitor hiking use on the peaks. We utilize that information for trail conditions as well as estimating economic impact of 14er hiking.
Jack of all trades in the office and in the field. So here's what we're going to be going through today. First, we're going to go through an introduction, both of just 14ers in general, as well as an introduction to the CFI and what they do, as well as onX Backcountry and what we do. Then we're going to go into a demo where we're going through how to plan a route on Capitol Peak using onX Backcountry. Then we're going to show you how to get your maps and your phone ready to get it into the field. And then we're going to go through the state of 14ers with the Colorado 14ers Initiative, talk about the projects they've been working on, and to give a little more insight into some of the stuff they've been doing. And then at the end, we'll have a giveaway as well as a question and answer. So make sure as you're going through this, you're putting questions in the Q&A so we can have some great ones to read live. Okay, so for everybody, if you have not yet purchased onX Backcountry, here's a really good opportunity. I'll show this later on in the presentation too, if you'd like to check it out. But today, if you purchase onX Backcountry via this link, which Grace will be putting in the chat shortly, you can save 30% on onX Backcountry Premium or Elite, and I'll go over the difference between those two subscriptions. And then for each purchase using this promo code, we're going to be donating to the Colorado 14ers Initiative. So great opportunity to get the product for a cheap price and for good cause. So check that one out. And then at the end, for those who stick around, we're going to be giving away this awesome Strafe jacket. It is a Strafe outerwear scout jacket. It is a Aspen-based company. They make this jacket is so great. It is so lightweight. It's wind and waterproof, and it packs down so small that it's almost a sin to not bring it with you on everywhere you go to anticipate those late season storms. So we're going to start really far panned out. So, Brian and I both live in Colorado, where you can't go to a bar without hearing somebody talk about the latest 14er they hiked. But not all of you may be familiar with what a 14er is. So the simple definition of a 14er is a mountain peak with an elevation of at least 14,000 feet. There are 96 14ers in the United States, including Alaska, and Colorado has the highest concentration of those peaks with 54. So each of these peaks has a different set of characteristics, challenges, and route options, and they actually vary quite significantly in all these aspects. So each one of them presents their own challenges and is considered an achievement for outdoor enthusiasts and hikers. So Brian, what is so special to 14ers about you, and why have you dedicated your life to them?
Yeah, the 14ers, growing up in Georgia, I had never heard of a 14er before until I came out to Colorado and started working kind of the conservation environmental nonprofit world. 14ers for me are so special because of how unique the ecosystems are, and our sole focus while we build and maintain trails that humans get to use. Our main focus is the plants and animals that exist there. Once you cross above tree line into the alpine ecosystem, you're entering into just totally different environment. Plants are anywhere from 10 to 100 times slower to regrow than plants below tree line. The soil that's found up there is estimated to be 1,000 years old for every 1 inch of it. So it's ancient soil and centuries old plants. They're super susceptible to the impacts of human beings. So that's where we come in, trying to build trails that are a little more sustainably aligned, built of durable materials. But these are, places that you can't really see anywhere else. So that's what I love about the 14ers.
That's such an awesome perspective, and also really shows the importance of like why we need to, if we're going up these peaks, to treat them, in a very special way, because these mighty mountains have very fragile ecosystems. And it's up to us to make sure that we're treading lightly so that future generations can have their breath taken away by them as well. So why 14ers for me? For me, it's the challenge of self. I live in a place where I get to see some of these 14ers, and I am daydreaming about being at the top of them, getting to the top of them, and all the things that are included into building yourself into the position where you're ready for it. So that's kind of my perspective on 14ers, is the physical and human challenge, and the beauty and everything else too. So sweet. Brian, do you want to give just a quick intro into CFI and the work that you guys do?
Yeah, so CFI is a nonprofit. We partner with the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management to protect and preserve Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks. When our organization was formed in 1994, of the 54 peaks, there were only 2 routes in the entire state that were planned. Everything else was socially created, which means people got out of their car at the trailhead and they went straight up the mountain. They weren't really taking into consideration if they were trampling, these fragile alpine plants that might not be found anywhere else on the planet, just on that one mountain or in this one state, causing severe erosion, how with the snow melt and the rain, they weren't thinking about these things. So our organization raises the money. We hire paid professional trail crew builders. We also engage volunteers on stewardship projects to go in and reconstruct these routes, building new trails from the ground up, as well as taking care of the trails, doing routine maintenance and restoration of these areas.
That's awesome. And as the popularity of 14ers and hiking them has grown, so does the need for an organization like yours to advocate for them, to help reconstruct them, and help guide the future of them. So thank you, and everybody you work with, for everything you do.
Thank you.
Cool. So I'm going to go over a little bit of onX history, since some of you may not know a little bit about us, but onX started as a hunting GPS company. In fact, onX Hunt started in 2009, and that was like right around, when smartphones were just coming out. So before that, everybody in the wild was using Garmin GPS devices. So onX originated as a company that would have like an SD card chip that you would put into those devices, and it would overlay information that was relevant to hunters, such as private lands information and property boundaries and stuff like that. So as smartphones became more and more popular, we decided to build from the ground up a standalone mapping app for hunters. And once we built that into a way that we thought was really useful and effective, we said, well, what else can we do with these incredible maps? So in 2019, we launched onX Off-Road. And in 2021, onX Backcountry hit the scene. And onX Backcountry, between the 3 apps, is more devoted to hiking, backcountry skiing, all of the human-powered activities that you like to do. So it has a whole different set of features than the other apps. It's catered to that user group. So just at a glance, here's some information about onX Backcountry. We're multi-season. We have a dedicated trail and snow mode. And when you toggle between those, it actually changes not only the satellite imagery that you see, but also the trail data and the information you see within it. So we have over 770,000 miles of trails in the app, or just actual individual trails. We have 27,000 trail routes and adventures, 12 detailed ski guidebooks. Those are all sourced from Beacon Guidebooks, which is some of the best guidebooks, the ones you can physically buy. So we've digitized them and overlaid them in our app. We also have all of our maps work offline. So this helps really well in the planning phase, but also in the execution when you're out there. We also have color-coded public land ownership. customizable waypoints, map marker tools, which we'll be going through in pretty good details. We're building the map for this adventure. And then we have tools like slope angle and slope aspect, snow conditions, avalanche forecast, GPS tracking, wildfire layers as well to see where active fires are, historic fires, etc. So we'll be going through all that in a few minutes here. And then here's a handful of new features that we have released since basically summer began. We have a new and improved 3D on iOS. The screenshot was actually taken with my phone. And it's just like a really great way to visualize the adventures that you're about to go on. And we'll be doing a lot of 3D in our hands-on building here. We also have for our elite subscribers a new recent imagery layer that will show aerial imagery of the areas that you're going to be in a 1 to 2 week span of recency. So you can look at snow and look at conditions. I've been looking at lately too to look at lake levels and seeing some of the reservoirs that are traditionally really low have all filled up again. So you can go play in them again. And then we also have Route Builder, which we'll be using within this to gauge your route, have it snap along a trail as you're building it, and then tell you mileage and elevation along the way. And then trip reports. So you can now report back with like, were there down trees in the middle of the hike? You know, is it impassable because the rivers are too high, etc. So exciting stuff. Roads improving. So yeah, without further ado, we're going to go into the onX Backcountry demo on Capitol Peak. So we want to start off with a big disclaimer about 14ers in general. Hiking a 14er can be extremely dangerous. And that kind of adds the importance of figuring out what you're getting yourself into before you leave. So some of the things that you need to be on, have on your mind when you're planning your 14er and thinking about the consequences of it is, all of these are at 14,000 feet. That's really high altitude, which means very low oxygen levels. And that's something you're gonna have to consider too, especially if you're coming from sea level, making sure you're giving yourself time to acclimate to the elevation, making sure that you've been training because it is easier to move in lower elevations than it is in higher. There's also rapidly changing weather conditions in Colorado. So even today, like a big storm came through at like 5 o'clock out where I live, and there was lightning, thunder, and you could also see blue skies at the same time. If you're stuck on top of a 14er when that is occurring, it could be a very dangerous and deadly situation. Either, the rocks could be slippery from the water, you could get blown off the side of the mountain, or lightning is a real hazard up there. There's also steep and challenging terrain, as shown here with the knife's edge, which we'll be talking about a little bit later too. There's exposure on a lot of these. There's a lot of like very steep punches on a lot of these, and it's real mountaineering. You also, and sometimes you're in some conditions, need to worry about rockfall and avalanches. If there's still snow in the peaks, avalanches can be a real concern, and rockfall can be a concern on a lot of the ones, especially in the elk range. There's also limited cell coverage. You can't expect on most of these to get a call out for search and rescue, or even your friends if you get separated from them. Route finding can become difficult as well as you get into these talus fields that are hard to tell. Is that the path, or is it just a bunch of flat rocks? You will also find yourself physically exhausted after hiking for 8 hours sometimes and feel like you can't continue on. And then comfort and experience, like comfort with exposure, lack of experience with route finding and planning, all this stuff can put yourself in a pretty dangerous situation. And the 14er that we're talking about today is also a very dangerous one, which you'll know why when we start going into it. But lots of exposure, and we'll try to go through some of the hazards as well. Anything to add, Brian?
No, I mean, you were mentioning weather conditions, and I think there's this commonly said phrase of, at least in the 14er community, of being down off the mountain by noon. And I would disagree that it's probably more important to just be able to learn how to watch the weather systems building. I was down in the Sangre de Cristos 2 weeks ago, popped out of the tent at 6 a.m. and watched a bolt of lightning strike the summit of Ellingwood Point. I needed to be going higher up into the basin and didn't have cell service. So, fortunately got on a Garmin InReach and was able to message my wife to send me some information about what the weather was looking like. But, it was not popping up on any of the forecasts that she was able to pull and send to me. And so you got to be able to kind of read the clouds and see what's actually happening right in front of you. It's not always going to be what the weather forecast tells you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, in some of these mountain ranges too, it's like the clouds will move in weird ways around these high peaks and just create their own
Yeah,
weather patterns, it seems.
exactly.
Sweet. So the first step when you're picking your 14er is, you got to pick your peak and you got to find your beta. And I think like the important thing for this is starting small, or starting with like a more, peak that you're familiar with. Maybe you're familiar with the area. Maybe your friend has done it. There's just so many resources out there for these. So onX Backcountry, I'll show you some of the route features that we have and shows you some of the routes that we have in our app. But I'm always a proponent that you can never get too much information on any of these peaks and for a lot of these adventures. So 14ers.com is an incredible resource for current conditions. The community there is really strong, and people will tick the peak and they'll go in there and report what they experienced while they're out there. So always a good experience there. And then there's also a lot of Facebook groups. So 14ers.com has their own Facebook group. There's one called Colorado 14ers, and there's actually a lot of other smaller groups as well. And those are always great places where people are celebrating their accomplishments. They're talking about their experiences, and then they're advocating for issues and stuff like that. So if you're interested in checking off a lot of 14ers, or even just want feedback on one, that's a good place to look, because a lot of times people often have the same questions as you, and you can kind of look in there, or you can ask a fresh one if you want to get engaged with their community. There's also a ton of YouTube videos, lots of people posting step-by-step on how they accomplish these peaks, and it always does a really good job when you're looking at somebody's GoPro feature and they're standing on the knife's edge and you're kind of like, okay, I'm not ready for that right now. And that'll kind of guide you to look for something that you can build that experience pool with. And always phone a friend. Like if you have a friend that is in the mountains and does a lot of 14ers and has a lot of experience, and there's somebody you trust, they're a really good resource as well to reach out to and to learn more. So yeah, and like in terms of Brian, like suggestions on like beginner 14ers, do you want to run through like a list of ones that you'd recommend for beginners?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got 54 in the state. I would say 30 to 40 of them are strenuous hikes. They don't involve scrambling or extreme exposures. They're just long hikes at high elevation. So there's a lot of good beginner 14ers. The top list is always going to be Quandary Peak, Mount Bierstadt, Grays and Torreys peaks. Although these are closed currently, oftentimes Mount Democrat, Mount Lincoln, and Cameron are a loop that you can connect to multiple in the same day. One of my favorites that would probably be a great intro peak is Huron Peak. It's a little bit further from the Denver metro area, but you get a little bit more of kind of a secluded feel. You're a little further from bigger cities and big roads, so it really feels like a kind of remote experience. Yeah,
that's some great information. And again, it's crawl, walk, run with the 14ers. Like build up your experience with exposure, figure out like your system for planning logistics and timing and all the other stuff and what gear you need to carry. And then, your experience with the weather patterns. And then, there's a lot of ones to tick off. So don't shoot for the biggest ones first, is my advice. But
yeah, and I'll give a little shameless plug. CFI does have a YouTube channel as well. We've got about 70 educational videos where we talk about alpine botany and wildlife. We've also done some series about mountain safety, specific to Capitol Peak and the Elk Mountains. What sort of gear and things do you need to bring for some of these harder peaks? So definitely a good resource is Colorado 14ers Initiative's YouTube page as well.
Okay, so we have decided to focus this one on Capitol Peak, which is definitely in the advanced category. And the reasons we decided to choose this one is the work that CFI has done on it recently, as well as some of the logistical stuff that's been going on with the new permitting system in the Maroon Bells Snowmass Wilderness. So if you are planning on hiking this 14er, I would say the best way to do it would be to get a permit to camp at Capitol Lake. So this is the way it looks now, basically for this area. So one of the pieces of the adventure too is going through and figuring out like, okay, like what does the permit look like? Where does that put me at camp? and all the other stuff. So I will show you in a little bit. So like this is what the government will give you, right? Like you reserve one of these campsites. Okay, cool. Where is that, right? And then, you know, if you don't have a permit, they actually have a zone, and I'll show you, this is the zones of all the Maroon Snowmass Wilderness. That the Conundrum Hot Springs Zone actually has been around for a couple of years now. But the rest of this is new, as well as Capitol Lake Zone. And this has made logistics for stuff like the Four Pass Loop and Snowmass Lake and Capitol Peak and the Maroon Bells and a lot of other different peaks in this area a little bit more logistically difficult. So I'll show when we get into the mapping portion, like a little bit more of like how you can take that information and put it in your map as part of your planning. And then also with, whoa, went too far. Still going too far. Also with this, like looking at the regulations for any wilderness area is always a really good idea, right? So for people who are spending the night in this wilderness area, you can expect bears, right? So all food must be stored in an IGBC approved bear resistant container. You must limit your group size to 10 with no more than 15 stock animals. Campfires are prohibited at Capitol Lake and above 18,000 or 10,800 feet. And then another really big thing is in wilderness areas, motorized and mechanized equipment is prohibited. So no bicycles, no ATVs, no drones, no game carts, no hang gliders, no paragliders, etc. And Brian, you were telling me earlier, it extends even to the trail counters that you use to monitor how many people are on the trail.
Yeah, so we've been a partner with the Forest Service for 30 years. We are essentially raising money and doing work that they're not able to do. So a great partner for a long time. We've applied for permits to put infrared trail counters in wilderness areas. These are sensors that are about this long, and they're attached to a battery pack, usually hidden in a tree or in a rock cairn. And we've been, turned down every single time we've applied for one. So they're super strict regulations.
Yeah, and like that just shows how serious our government, and I think we should, as outdoor adventurers, is when we go into a wilderness area, it's like a sacred space. It's like it's somewhere that it's less developed than national parks. Like it's an area that is supposed to remain as wild and free as can possibly be. So I always try to tread with respect when I'm in these areas. So cool. With that, we're gonna jump in onX Backcountry. I'm kind of already like halfway in here for a second. Hold on, I meant to do this earlier. My cheater notes. So I want to show just like a brief overview of onX Backcountry and help you orient yourself if you've never been in the app before. What we're currently looking at is the web map. So everything you do in web map will actually automatically sync with your onX account and go over to your phone. So a lot of when I'm planning adventures is I'm spending it on the web map on my desktop computer because I can push all the buttons, I can see it on a big screen, and it just tactilely feels better for me. But there's a very similar experience on the mobile device, and I'll show a little bit of how to make sure your device is tuned for the adventure when you go there. So just to orient you, this is our search bar. If you're looking for a peak, if you're looking for a town, if you're looking for anything in particular, this is a really good place to start. You can search for very specific things, and it'll often have a rec point for it. So like campsites, trailheads, reservoirs, a lot of that stuff you can find here. Once you select over here, this is your trail versus snow selector. So as I mentioned earlier, when you are in trail mode, there's a handful of layers that are like devoted to trail mode and the summer and everything like that. And when you switch to snow mode, it'll show you stuff that's relevant to backcountry skiing, like avalanche reports, slope angle, slope aspect, etc. So I'm not going to go super into detail with the snow mode today, but I will go through some of these layers in the summer mode. So we have a layer here for active wildfires, and like as you're planning 14 years in the spring too, you may have heard that there is a wildfire burning on the western slope. That's the Spring Creek fire, and you can actually see it right here. So when you click on this too, you can see the name of it, when we last updated our source, or when we last checked when the source was last updated, and then what percentage containment it has. So this is a really good resource, especially if you're looking at an area that may be impacted by wildfires that you may want to move somewhere else. So you can visually see where this is occurring and demystify it. And it's a pretty awesome resource. You can also see historic wildfires. That's where this yellow one's actually coming in. So where has burned in the past? And this can be really important if you're looking for an area and you want to know if, hey, is there going to be down trees? Is the landscape going to be pretty burnt? And then the positive of that too is, you know, sometimes mushroom foragers love looking at the burned areas to find where morels are, you know, growing, or, you know, sometimes in the spring too, these burn areas can be really beautiful with flowers, because for some reason flowers love the nitrates or whatever's in the soil after a fire. We also have air quality layers. I think there's been a lot of people, especially in the East Coast, who have been caught off guard with air quality issues and they're experiencing wildfire smoke for the first time. So this is a good way to keep an eye on air quality. This is current air quality. So it has a spectrum. So like yellow would be, if you actually click it, whoa, I did not mean to do that. If you click it, you can see the air quality index for the area. I don't know why I didn't do it when I did it there, but as you can see, the colors get darker. In fact, it gets like purple up here in Canada. That you can actually see like what the air quality is. So if you're looking at an area to recreate and the air quality is really bad, you can use this map to say like, hey, we should probably pick a different 14er. The air quality is really poor where we're going. And then we have a smoke forecast layer as well that'll show you where the smoke plumes are moving to. Kind of seems just hazy all over right now. So yeah. And then we have private land data as well. So like you can actually see, this is an onX Backcountry Elite feature. And if land ownership is a big deal to you, I'll try to go where we were over here. So yeah, if like land ownership is a big deal to you, let's go into Carbondale. You can actually see who owns whatever piece of land you're looking at. And this kind of comes from our hunt background, but you know, as outdoor adventurers as well, like you do not want to be trespassing on other people's land. So this can be a really insightful piece, is to know where the public lands begin, where the private lands begin, and we'll kind of jump into a case in that in the future. On this right-hand side, we have all of our tools. So we'll be going into depth with these and like actually using these in our example, but this is the route builder, which allows you to snap to a trail and, you know, plan your distance and elevation to make a custom route. The line tool, which tells you the line between 2 points. So if you're like, how far is it in a straight line from A to B? The area shape tool, which lets you measure an area, see the acreage, as well as, you know, kind of draw a line for yourself to either stay in or stay out of. Waypoints. This is a good tool to mark parking, campsites, obstacles, things you want to make sure you have on your mind as you're navigating in the field. And then we actually have photo waypoints as well. So you can actually tell that story with a photo that lives on the waypoint, which I'll actually show in the future as well. Down here, we have our, you know, your zoom, your not zoom, and then we have your compass. So if you hold down control when you're in this view and click, you can start pivoting around. You can even tilt it into a 3D style over here. Look at beautiful Mount Sopris real quick. Towers over the town I live in. And then if you're ever trying to orient yourself north again, you can just click this and it'll pop you back. Your base map selector is right here. So this is where you can select between 2D and 3D, and your satellite, which is just an overview of like the images from space, right? Your hybrid, and then your topo. So you can see your topo lines overlaid with the satellite imagery in here. Or if you wanted to see more classic topo style, we have that here as well. And then I will show you, let's go to Capital. Capital Peak. We have this new feature. This is for elite users only. But if you go back into that base map selector, we have a recent imagery layer. So if you toggle this on, it'll give you current conditions in the mountains. And your dates are right here. So every 2 weeks, we release a new layer for this. So, you know, even right now, like July 10th, like it was between July 26th and July 10th is when the satellite imagery was captured in this area. And it's already been 10 days since this layer is out. So you can expect that snow has melted quite a bit from this. But this is also a really good thing to look at and say like, okay, snow is something we're going to have to consider when we're in here. There's going to be probably some pockets of snow, especially as we get to higher elevations. And it's really cool that you can actually see this in 3D. The resolution is a little bit lower, but it's pretty cool stuff. And it's great for the hiker who wants to find dry trails and the backcountry skier who wants to find snow in the middle of summer, like myself. I do that a lot. Cool. And then I'll show some of this other stuff in the field, but there's the Discover tab. This is your home base to discover new trails. It kind of navigates the area that you're in. So if, like, let's say you're looking for hiking trails near Aspen, it's better to go to that area and then click this Discover button, and it'll start showing you the stuff in your zone. And then I'll go over the rest of this later, but yeah, we'll begin our demo looking at Capitol Peak here. So as I always say, I'm sorry, what?
Grace is saying that they're getting some reports you cannot see the map right now.
That is not good. Okay, let me turn off screen share and turn it back on.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, and thanks for the heads up, everybody. Okay, what about now? You guys see it? Any still no? You can see it?
People are saying they can see the map now. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I'm bummed for the people that that didn't get to see the overview section, but I'll try to, like, really, as I'm using this stuff like functionally right now, I'll try to really showcase that, so we can make sure everyone can see it.
Yeah, looks like some folks might have been able to see it before as well. So.
And sorry, I missed the SOS, Grace. And also thank you, Grace. You are killing it in the chat. I know a lot of questions and comments are coming in. So cool. As I like to say, every adventure begins in the parking lot. And that can definitely be the case when you're hiking a 14er. So I actually have a cheater system to help with my presentation here. I hope you all don't mind, but I pre-assembled some folders here, and a folder here with some of the information. So I'm just going to toggle that on to help guide me in my talk here. So yeah, the parking lot, right? So when we're looking at Capitol Peak, the first thing we want to look at is, where's the trail? So we can actually do that via this Discover section. Oh, there's a lot of trails. There it is, Capitol Peak. So when you hover over this route too, it gets, like, kind of highlighted, and it's a good place to start here is, like, looking at this, right? So, when you're going in here, this shows you basically where you're going to want to start, right? So when you're on your mobile device as well, when you're clicking on one of these, there's a button that you can press that says navigate to, and then you can open up directions in Google Maps or in Apple Maps, depending on what you prefer to use. But, a lot of times you have questions. Can my car make it to the trailhead? And a lot of these 14ers start on pretty rugged roads up in the mountains. So a really good place to find information on that is, I think our description is pretty good for this. I think it says a little bit about it, or maybe it was the Capitol Peak one. But those Facebook groups too, you always see people saying, like, can my my Subaru Forester make it, etc. Another good resource is a lot of the trailheads and the trail access is actually off-roading trails. So onX Off-Road is also a really good resource for this. In fact, the access point for this and also going further up the road up here is mapped in onX Off-Road by myself. So check it out if you're over there, and you can see my review on it. Brian, do you have a hand up?
No.
Oh, weird. So cool. So yeah, like, just starting to look at it, like, there's actually 2 parking lots for this trail. So, as you can see, like, this is the main parking lot, and from my experience on this trail, it's a little bit bumpy, a little bit ruddy. And one time in particular, I was up there in the fall trying to get that epic fall leaf with Capitol Peak in the background photo that you might have seen on the internet. And it had snowed the night before, and there was just a ton of, like, there's like an inch of snow on top of all these wet leaves, and it made for a pretty slippery ride up there. So this is the main parking lot. And as you can see, parking here honestly could be a struggle for you if you get there in a very crowded time. So this is the first consequence to look for when you're looking at the 14er and using satellite imagery and saying, like, can I park here, or will I be parking, like, on the side of a cliff? That's another important thing to look at. The alternate parking lot is down here, which I'll just show you briefly. Like, it's kind of far, right? But if you have a low clearance vehicle and you can't make it up this road, there's no shame in starting in this zone. So I'm going to show you for the first time, like route builder, like, okay, my car cannot make it to the upper trailhead. So how many miles is that going to add onto my journey? Over here on the right-hand side is where you'll find your route builder tool. So when you click this, you can say, all right, here's the parking lot. And then it starts snapping to the road. And as you click as well, you can see on the left-hand side, the elevation profile of, everything and then the distance. So as we keep going up this road, we can say, okay, I don't know if my car is going to make it. So like, let's have this as a backup plan. And using the elite feature as well, looking at this private lands, like you're not going to want to park along this road if things aren't according to plan. If you think halfway through here, you can't make it, because then you're going to be parking next to some landowner and aggravating them. So it's always a good idea to like also look at that layer. So as you get further up the road, this is to the trailhead parking. You're going to see it adds exactly 2 miles each way on your hike. So just another variable, like, and use that information as you will. So I have this information here. I'm going to do like plan B parking, because I personally don't like parking further than I need to, but that's that. So we have our first piece of data here, and that's just to give us the plan B if things aren't according to plan. If things are going according to plan and we find a great parking spot up here and we're feeling good, the next step is trying to figure out our route. So there's actually a spur here, like there's 2 ways. I'm a little zoomed in for this, but at this trailhead, you got to make sure you're starting on the right one, right? So is it the Capitol Ditch Trail or is it the Capitol Creek Trail, right? So one of the things I like looking at, especially like 3D helps this perspective. Do you want to lose this elevation going down to the creek, or do you want to keep on this ridge and not add any more work than you need to do? So personally, like I would probably take this ditch trail and go along this ridge. And again, like you can see all these layers too. Like if you're more of a topo person, that will actually tell that story to you as well. You can see these topo lines, you can see the steep valley, and you can see it in 3D. So like this can give you a broader perspective of like option A or option B. I'll go back to satellite. So this is where I'm going to begin my second route. So we click build route. We start at the parking lot, and then again, we're going to start clicking along this route, and it's going to snap to the trail as we go. So continue along the ditch trail, going further over here, and just continuing on our merry way here. So earlier I mentioned the boundary for the permit zone, right? So like if you don't have a permit, these are where all the campsites are that you can reserve on recreation.gov. But if you don't have them, you need to stay outside of this this polygon that I drew using the area shape tool. So like that's one interesting variable with the changes in the regulations that they've had recently. So I think like, in a perfect world, like, you're also going to have to look at a route like this and say, okay, like I know when I'm going up to Capitol, like I'm, like these campsites are in a very perfect position because it allows you to wake up, roll out of bed, and start going before, too early. But like how much additional mileage will this add if you have to camp outside of the zone? And even can you find like a flat area to camp, et cetera? Like you can solve that problem with the onX Backcountry tool. For our objective demonstration here, I'm going to act like we had campsite number 1 booked and everything was according to plan, because that just makes the route way more easy and way more accessible and way more straightforward than adding several miles and a lot of elevation to the beginning of your day before you start punching up to the summit here. So we're going to continue up this trail, and you can see just how easily it snaps the route. It's way easier to estimate mileage and all those like little micro twists and turns that we have in the trail. And then I actually marked all these out with waypoints to show where all the different campsites are. And I can actually pull up the government map again. But like this helps visualize a little bit better. Here, I'll save this for day 1. Day 1. Cool. So yeah, that helps visualize like this is what the government sent in their map. And you can see that kind of like, okay, here it is over here, and you can see these couple bumps and these different dots. But when you lay them out visually, especially if they're more spread out, like I know on Conundrum, for example, there's, your vision would be, oh, I'm going to camp right next to the hot springs. It's going to be great. Some of the campsites are a half mile, I think up to a mile from the hot springs. So like also planning like those logistics of like, where's your camp relative to where you want to be. And then, yeah, once you have your route built for the first day, this is where you can see your elevation profile. And like, as you are clicking and dragging along, kind of at the end here, but clicking and dragging along this line, like you can actually see the mileage as you go. So like, this is a really good resource to figure out like, where the steep parts are, those will be in red, and where the flatter parts are, that'll be in green. And then you can see where your home sweet home is for the night. So we will be at Camp 1, which is right here. And we will have a beautiful view of Capitol Peak. Whoa. A beautiful view of Capitol Peak from our spot. So I'm actually gonna turn this off because it turns it too red. So cool. Brian, do you have anything to add for day one, for getting to camp?
No, I mean, yeah, looks good. Notice how all the campsites are below tree line in a more durable surface. None of the campsites are located up there in the alpine. That's it on purpose.
Yeah. And, with this area too, like just having designated campsites, they've had those for a while, and now having them permitted just prevents that situation of overcrowding. Like you actually select which campsite you get to instead of showing up and saying, oh man, they're all full. Like, where do I go now? And, and create another campsite and further lead to like the degradation of this valley. So we've been harping on the weather a lot. So I want to take this opportunity as a time to show what our weather widget looks like and how it can help you. Again, I have this perspective that like, there's no such thing as too much information. So like our weather app uses Weather Underground data. So it's pretty good. It's pretty sophisticated, but like you always want to make sure you know exactly what's happening in the mountains, especially when timing one of these summits, because once you are up here, you are very exposed, and it's going to be a very slow going. You're not going to be able to run down this thing and get below tree line when the storm comes in. So this is our weather widget. When you click it over here in the bottom right corner, it'll pop up with this like crosshair. And the beauty of this is that you can see, I'll just go into more vertical mode. You can see estimations of what the weather will be based on your elevation. So like it's 59 degrees right now at camp, but as you get to the summit, you're going to see that temperature is dropping and the conditions are actually different, like 5 degrees colder at the summit right now. So that's always important to remember too, is, if you're coming up from the Front Range or you're coming from a different area, the weather is incredibly different up high, and even spending the night at one of these high elevation campsites than it is in the bottom, or even down in the valley where I live in Carbondale. So this is a good tool to kind of like plan for this, right? So with Capitol, with trying to get up really early, you can look at your hourly forecast. So this is today, and as you keep scrolling, you can see like even in the afternoon we have like a chance of precipitation, 15% chance throughout the night. And then as you go into the next day, like this is going to be the day where you're like, okay, like what is our weather looking like for tomorrow? And, as you're going through the day, it actually looks pretty good, right? It looks pretty good, but around 4 to 5, you start to see these clouds icons show up. So like, that's another thing is like, it's what we call monsoon season in Colorado. Like it could be perfectly sunny all day, or there's a chance that, some precipitation will just whisk through the mountains, or, in the afternoon. So I think that this is enough of a hazard for me to say that we need to get up and down by noon tomorrow when we're summiting this peak. And then you can also see a handful of other things with this weather tool. You can see your your this week forecast, right? You can see your sunrise and sunset times, which is also good. Like a lot of people also will hike a 14er in the dark because they want to see the sunrise from one of those peaks. So this can give you an estimate on when that is and when the sun will go down. And then you can also see your moon phases if you like chasing full moons and crescent moons. That data is also in the app. So we've decided that we need to be up and down pretty early. So it's time for us to build our route to the summit. And this is where I actually prefer, like we have these rich trails on, you can see them kind of like overlaying this black information. When you click it, it'll tell you about both the summit and the extended thing. So this is the information if you want to see just about the summit. This one's actually way more detailed about all the obstacles you'll encounter. But I kind of noted them all out. So we'll kind of go over a lot of these through this, but that's a really good source of information for just like a play-by-play. But for this too, like I actually like turning off the trail data, and I'll show you how to do that. If you click the trail button in your activity finder, there's this activity type hiking backpack. And when you turn that off, this shows the steepness of the trail. So red being very steep, orange being pretty dang steep. And then you can see on the saddle, it turns to green and yellows. So this is always a good way for me to visualize that as well. And just try to like, you know, to see that visually as you're going into it. We start building the route. Again, the route builder tool is up here. And we'll actually start from camp this time because I want to show you this other thing. So there are going to be opportunities where you're going to go off trail and you're going to be in places that aren't, like the snap 2 is kind of acting weird, right? Because it's like, hey, you're not on a trail. Like, you know, it's kind of trying to magnetize to whatever it's near. There are these 2 sections over here, the point draw and the snap 2. So if you ever find yourself off trail, or you ever find like a trail just isn't quite connected to the trail you're trying to go to, this is a good way to cheat it and to like get it to go back on the magnetized track. So from here, you click your point draw, you get it kind of in a place where it's the map. You go back to snap 2, you click again, and then you're on. So here we go. We're going to start our climb. And, you know, this is going to be coffee in the morning. This is a very steep route with a lot of switchbacks, and you're going to be gaining elevation very fast. So, you know, we can see we've just started. We've only gone, let's go to the first mile. Oh, not even.
I don't think it's a mile to the saddle.
Yeah. All right. So your first half mile, you're already going to gain 745 vertical feet. So you're going to be right out of the gates, just gaining elevation and really just punching up a very steep portion of the trail. So I think the route, especially with the work that CFI has done, is pretty straightforward through this section.
Yeah, but this is where most of our work occurs for the maintenance each year.
Nice. Okay. Jen, as I'm scrolling around, you can see me kind of getting lost, but I'm holding down control when I'm trying to rotate and pan, and then I'm clicking and dragging. So like that's how you start navigating around and giving yourself a better perspective on the route. And I'll show you a little bit about that. When we get on mobile too, I'll show you how you do that on a mobile device. So yippee, we've made it to the saddle here. So this is a portion where route finding can get kind of difficult. And Brian, like chime in here, like there's definitely a lot of like, you know, boulder hopping and talus fields and just a lot of like loose rock that may look like a trail, but it's not. And then you kind of get off track.
Yeah, I mean, this is essentially where our work ceases to exist. So we've left this kind of in its natural state so that people do get to enjoy that, you know, route finding experience, which a lot of people seek out when they're doing mountaineering. But yeah, there will be indicators of that you're on the right place or that you're not in the right place. But yeah, it's mostly rock and talus once you get up there. Yeah.
So this is where, you know, you're going to need to use, your own senses to help find this route. The app will help and it'll help you get perspective. But like at the end of the day, like, you know, you're going to have to find your own routes through this section a lot of times. So the tip I had that Brian shared too was, you know, as you're going through here, because this is an out and back, I'm just going to pan around, is making sure that you're also looking behind you, right? Like saying, all right, that was kind of difficult to route find. I knew where I was kind of headed up through the saddle, but like making sure you're like looking behind you and like knowing where on this saddle that you, well, I went to the matrix there, but like knowing on the saddle, like where you should be aiming for on your way back. Because there are situations where like if you get too high above here, you could start getting some loose, scrambly sections and lose your way when you're tired after summiting this massive peak here. All right, so we're just continuing on our way here. We're using the snap to routing. We're jiving. You know, as you can see through the satellite imagery, like lots of loose rock, lots of boulders, like, you know, take your steps very intentionally. Don't twist your ankle. You know, be very gentle. And then the first obstacle you'll encounter, or one of the main icons here, is the K2. So the K2 is this lump right here that kind of sits above the ridge, and this will be your first chance to get eyes on the rest of the ridge, the knife's edge, and a lot of the other terrain that you're about to inch your way across as you go through. And Brian, like, I heard one piece of advice too for this is, for sure, like, this is one of your main decision points, right? Like,
sure.
If you're seeing weather, turn around. You know, if you're really pacing behind, like, now is a good time to check in with your crew to figure out exactly what you want to do, and to really just get eyes on your objective.
Yeah, you got to be fully committed once you go past K2. So
yeah. So once you're on here, I've read this from 14ers.com, is that some people opt to go over K2, while some people opt to go around K2. And I think that's a matter of preference and conditions. But the rock seems to be a little more solid. And to the sides, you're kind of exposing yourself to looser rock and to a bigger fall zone. So I think it's up to you on that point too, to make that decision when you get there based on where you're at and what you're doing. And then as we're working our way across, it's going to start getting really narrow. I have a waypoint here that marks the exposure and the knife's edge. Well, I can't do it. I'm in Route Builder. So actually we'll go from that. But we showed a photo of knife's edge earlier. That is the part where it is literally an exposed triangle, where, the consequence on both sides of this peak are massive drop-offs on both sides that go all the way down to the lake, basically on this side, and to the lakes in the basin over here. So this is the part that you see a lot of times when you're looking at pictures of Capitol Peak, and it's definitely the part where you have to be dialed. Some people choose to straddle the rock and inch their way across. Some people are cocky enough to walk across it like a tightrope. But when you're up on the side of this mountain too, like, the wind gusts can be very random and just blow you. And, there's really, there are some people that will try to use protection, like use like a rope or some other method, but a lot of the hikers that choose not to do that. So, yeah, this is the part where you have to be dialed and you cannot take any wrong steps. Once you've traversed the knife's edge, your journey isn't over. A lot of people will be like, whew, I made it across there. It's easy, smooth sailing from here on out. And that's not the case. So, like Brian, there's a lot of crux. There's a lot of the crux is up here as you get into this more loose and rocky terrain. So yeah, like how do you navigate that? Like, do you just stay focused?
Picking your way through it. Yeah. Setting your steps and your hand placement with intention, and possibly testing your moves before you committing any weight to them. Again, you mentioned the knife edge. That's the iconic, dramatic piece that everyone looks at and you see all the photographs of. That's arguably really solid rock, and it's fairly flat. Now you're getting into the steeper terrain. You're getting into stuff where it's the classic Elk Mountains loose rock that can just crumble in your hands. So yeah, more dangerous terrain that you've entered here.
And I'm oversimplifying it, but as you can see, like, as you're going through this terrain, just like, look how steep and exposed this is. Like, if you take one wrong step and things start moving, whoa, I was too zoomed in. You'll start to see, come on, internet. Yeah, so prefer to refresh here and see if it'll do it. Got to go out and back in. So you can just see like using this 3D map, like how much exposure you're actually going to be dealing with, just the level of like rock, of just, loose stuff and everything, and just how steep it is. So as you're going through here, like you're not out of the woods yet. And not only do you have to go up this, but you have to go down it. So, and an oversimplification, hooray, you've made it to the summit. So in just 2.2 miles, you've gained 2,631 vertical feet. And a lot of this is going to be slow going. Like, obviously you're not going to be able to move as fast through any of this as you would for the day one sections where you're kind of just hiking on dirt. So that is also a really critical component to factor in when you're figuring out your pacing. You're trying to avoid those late afternoon storms, etc. And then once you're here, the only way back is the way you came. And there has been a handful of incidents, rescues, and fatalities of people who think they found another way. So like that's definitely something to like look at with this in 3D too, is, you may see a gully. I think some of the other gullies that people have taken are actually on this side, which we'll actually just start working our way back since we're kind of already going on time here. But like, even if you're like right here and you're saying on top of this, like, oh, I think I can go down here and just go down here and skip to the lake, like you're going to get cliffed out. You're going to find yourself into a situation where you're not going to be able to save yourself. You're going to get right around here, and everything is just you're going to realize that you've made a grave mistake. So this is one of the ones where there is, a lot of these 14ers will have multiple ways up, multiple ways down. You can link them up. You can do different options. This is a up and down. There is no other way. And that's a good way to stay safe.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if it was 2017 or 2018, but I think in a 6-week span, we had 6 fatalities on this peak. So a lot of those were people that were unprepared for the environment that they were getting themselves into, and people that were getting across to the summit and thinking, I don't want to go back across that knife edge, so I'm going to take this shortcut straight down to the lake and get back to my tent. And unfortunately, that did not work.
Yeah, these mountains, very consequential. So I'm simplifying because we're already going pretty long, but you're going to come back the way you came. And then even just considering, like, let's say we only got permits for one night. So just to accomplish capital, it's 4.4 miles, it's 2740 vertical feet, and it's 2751 of elevation loss. So like, you're kind of going, that's a long day even for that. So you also have to work your way back to the car. So, as you keep moving down, you also have to work all the way out of here. So, hopefully as you start getting like a lower in the tree line, if an afternoon storm rolls in, you can take shelter and wait it out for a little bit. But just getting away from the above tree line section as soon as you can is definitely a large part of this. And then, again, I feel like sometimes my brain, like on the walk out in these parts, I just like black out and I'm at my car. That's when I'm lucky. So like, it's always good too, like when we see these twists and turns and you're tired, making sure that you're following this route and not going the incorrect way and adding miles onto your hike as well. So this is your day 2. It's a big day, 10 miles, and a lot of elevation gain and loss. So what I'm going to do too is I'm going to click this route that we built here, the day 1, and I'm going to add it to a folder. So in the My Content section, you can actually build folders and you can share these with your friends. So I'm actually going to drop this in the chat in a second here, but we added all the other stuff I already put in there was in there. So we do day 1, then here's day 2. And then we're going to do add to folder. And then I'll show you what it looks like. So the whole plan is in here. So here it all is. You can hide it if you don't want to see it. And you can click this to only show this folder on the map to eliminate all the other clutter if you have multiple overlapping routes. And then if you hit the share button, you can share this with everybody else who has an onX Backcountry account. So here it is. I just threw it into the chat. You guys can all click this link and import it directly into your onX Backcountry account. Cool. And the last thing I want to show is just how this will look on mobile. So, the question is, do your maps work offline? And the answer is yes. But you need to make sure that you have your offline maps prepared. So I like doing this. This is my hack for this is while you're in the in this on your web map, you can actually set up exactly where you want your offline maps to feature. So we click offline maps. We're going to show new offline map, and then you can choose your resolution. So like if I'm backcountry skiing and you really want to focus on the fidelity of those topo lines and like the trees and everything like that, like going to high resolution is great. In fact, I actually will do it with this one, but you can select your resolution. Like if you want to do a really broad area and you just need trail information and you don't need really high quality satellite imagery when you're out in the field, you already have your routes figured out. You can do that. But if you want to get a really detailed map, this one's not very far. It's only 8.1 by 6.3 miles. You can see your estimated download size here, and you can name it. So I'll call it capital. Whoa. Oh, well, yeah. And then you can even put a note in there, but I'll hit save. It'll give you this warning. Again, you're not done yet. This is just merely outlining like what your device will download, but you need to make sure you're going on your device and making sure it's downloaded first. So this is a great disclaimer, because the last thing you want is to be left out in the wilderness and saying, hey, I forgot to download my maps. So I'm going to move to my phone now. Hopefully this works. And all right, can you see my phone?
I can see it.
Nice. Actually, hold on, I got to reboot this thing. Sweet. So you can see everything we just built and everything we just worked on it's here. I didn't have to do anything. It automatically syncs between your desktop and your your mobile device. And here it all is. So I'll show you the offline maps. So in the bottom menu here, you have your offline maps section. If you click that, you can see this is the map that I outlined, this capital one, and you hit download. And you're going to want to wait until this thing is completely downloaded. And I guess mine was kind of big, so it's going to take a second here. But once it has downloaded, once it's downloaded, you have everything offline. I always like to test it by hitting this go offline button. This is a feature that makes it so it only uses what's downloaded on the app. So you can see we have these really crisp, topo lines. We have all of our layers. We have all the waypoints and trails, all that stuff's in there. The satellite imagery is nice and crisp even when we're offline. And it just gives you all the tools you need at your fingertips for when you're out for your big day. And we'll stop sharing that. And we'll go back into the presentation. All right, sweet. So that's a very simplified version of hiking one of the coolest mountains in Colorado, in my opinion. Cool. Well, can you all see my screen? Sweet. Okay. So now that you have decided like, hey, we're spending the night out there. Hey, here's all the obstacles and the challenges we have to face. You're going to want to take into factor like what kind of gear you need for this adventure. So here's a simplified gear list. Taking into consideration your backpacking stuff, your sleep system, your food system, the nutrition that you're going to need to put all those miles down, the clothing you're going to need to make it through the elements, the navigation, onX Backcountry, the tech, and oh yeah, with the onX Backcountry thing, like, people are always like, well, you should use a paper map. You should use a paper map too. So like at a lot of the trailheads, like, or a lot of different areas, like you can get your hands on paper maps. They're always a good resource. They're never a full replacement. If you're ever, phones break, you could drop one off the side of Capitol when you're taking a selfie. Who knows what'll happen? For tech, Garmin InReach, charging brick to keep your phone alive, headlamp. And then, as we mentioned earlier with the food system, you're gonna need a bear canister. Maybe it's a good idea to have bear spray, a first aid kit. And then, for cleanliness, wag bags. toilet paper, hand sanitizer, toothbrush, however grungy you want to be. And then for this particular mission, and for more advanced 14ers, helmets. Like, I think it should be mandatory on Capital if I was packing for one, because of all the loose rockfall potential on that later section. And then when you're looking at snow, are crampons and microspites needed? Do I need an ice axe? And then, for some of the more technical routes, like, do we need ropes? And all that stuff is going to factor into the carry that you're going to have while you're out on the mission.
Yeah, I'll say even for a day trip up a 14er, when I'm not even going to the summit and I'm just going to a trail counter at 13,000 feet, my backpack usually looks like I'm there for an overnight because I've got all this extra gear that I'm never going to touch. But always better to have it and not need it than to need it when you don't have it. So
absolutely. Brian, I did a lot of talking.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hand the stage over to you to talk about the state of the 14ers in Colorado right now, and some of the projects you guys are working on.
Yes, I mean, obviously we talked a lot about Capitol Peak today. We initially built that route in the early 2000s. We do annual maintenance in the Elk Mountains. Those trails are some of the best trails in our network of 14er trails that we've built, mainly because of the local funding that we've got. We get government funding from the city of Aspen, Pitkin County, Aspen Skiing Foundation, all donate money to annual maintenance of these places. We're looking at a map here. This is basically our internal database of what are the trail conditions. In 2011 through 2013, one of my colleagues hiked 42 of the routes, and he took foot by foot detailed notes of the conditions. Where's there erosion occurring? Where do we need to build retention walls with rocks? Where can we put in timber checks with logs? Where do we have existing staircases and things that might need to be rebuilt? And we're able to generate what's called our 14er report card. It assigned a letter grade to each of the routes. Capitol Peak here, you can see, has a lot of existing features that are currently in really good shape. There's proposed features and existing features that need to be actually installed. So a lot of the work that we've done on Capitol Peak this season, there was a project 2 weeks ago where we had our Adopt a Peak crew was in there for probably 4 days working by themselves on some really technical stuff. And then they were joined by volunteers for a 4-day overnight project. They were working in some of these areas from the lake up. So one of the most picturesque landscapes for some of our projects that volunteers get to work on.
Yeah, it's not a bad day at the office, but it sure is a long hike to get up there with tools.
yeah, we hike in tools. Obviously, this is in wilderness, so it's all primitive hand tools. So they're packing in everything that they need for the week and packing back out.
That's awesome. Cool. We can skip to the next one, and this is one that has been making the rounds. You also do a lot of monitoring, as we talked with some of the trail use monitoring tickers that you have. You want to talk a little bit about the report that you guys put out on the estimated hiking use on Colorado's 14ers and some highs and interesting learnings from that?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a project that I've been involved with since I started in 2015. Way back then, we started with 5 infrared trail counters. We've expanded almost every single year. Past 3 or 4 years, we've had trail counters at 23 peaks across the state. Basically, all of the non-wilderness peaks are now covered. We install these in the spring. Usually we're traveling on snow before the trails get super busy. Installing these potentially in trees, or if they're above tree line, they're buried in rock cairns, hidden from hikers. And then we have to pull them out every fall. So I get to travel to these places a couple of times each year to install and remove these things. With that data that we've got, we plug it into a program that one of our interns made for us back in 2016, which basically takes that raw data and it extrapolates to help us get estimates for places like Capitol Peak where we're not allowed to have a trail counter. It looks at different factors of like, what's the route difficulty, what is the length of the trail, the distance from the metro area, the popularity rating on 14ers.com, how many people have checked that they've climbed that peak. So we generate each year an annual economic impact and estimated hiking use report. In 2022, we're reporting that numbers dropped quite significantly from prior years. We're coming off of 2020 pandemic was, peak use. I think everybody saw that their trails here in Golden, anywhere across the country were crowded. What could people do? They were going to get outside. That was kind of the safe thing you could do. The 14ers saw exponential increase in use, almost 40% statewide, to a high of 415,000 people that hiked those in 2020. Factors have kind of come in, particularly affecting Front Range, really popular peaks, and those include parking restrictions. There's areas that are now, you have to pay to park in the parking lot, or you have to pay to take a shuttle, park your car in a local town and then take a shuttle up. There's also been some private land issues, and we've had private landowners closing access to some of these peaks. So the majority of this drop in use that we've seen are coming from probably the 10 most popular 14ers, which are those ones you see in the Front Range, the 10-mile range, Sawatch Mosquito Range. When you get into these more remote, more technical peaks like the San Juans, the Elks, and the Sangres, they're pretty much plateaued. They kind of stay in those same general ranges in terms of use. But yeah, these parking restrictions and private land issues are kind of the talk of everything right now. So
yeah, it's interesting to see like the proof of like the impact those have had, and it's for better and for worse, right? Like overcrowding was obviously an issue.
Yeah.
And now there's maybe a couple more hurdles to prevent people who are lower income from paying the shuttle fees and paying the parking fees to access these. But, as you said in our previous conversation too, is like a lot of these trails too, is like we can build sustainable trails to accommodate a lot of people as well. So like,
yeah, from what we found in the multiple different research studies that we've done is the hiking use is not directly correlated to the conditions of the resource. Something like Quandary Peak, we had 50,000 people climbing it in 2020, but we had invested several $100,000 in rebuilding the trail. We had put thousands of volunteer hours on that peak, and we brought the condition from like a C+ up to an A-. So that trail was really well built. It was very delineated, so people knew where to stay. They weren't hiking off on these fragile plants. So that really high use peak still had pretty good conditions. You go to someplace down in the San Juans like Mount Wilson, where you've got 1,000 to 3,000 people, but the trail is not sustainably located. People are either getting lost and going off and trampling and killing plants, which is causing more erosion. That peak has, arguably more resource impacts than some of the higher use peaks. So there were a lot of issues, and maybe the restrictions were necessary, mostly because of kind of the parking issues and congestion around trailhead and waste and that sort of thing. But we'd like to ideally see equitable access on these places and not restrict them to just people who can have flexible schedules or pay to go out there.
Yeah. All right. Now we get to talk about some of the work you have done to keep access on Mount Shavano in particular, and some of the purchases you guys have made for land to keep these open.
Yeah, so this is a screenshot you took from the onX maps showing some private land boundaries. This black line that you're seeing coming up this gully here is the existing trail on Mount Shavano. It's located just outside of Salida, Colorado. It's a 14er in the southern Sawatch Range. We had inventoried this peak back in 2011, and it got an F rating, and it's continued to get worse, mainly because we weren't doing a lot of work here. We needed to reroute the trail and put in a new, more sustainable route. But the issues is we were dealing with all these private land claims. So these rectangles that you see highlighted in red, there's about, I think, 12, maybe 10 or 12 privately owned mining claims that exist from this peak to the south all the way to the summit of Mount Shavano. In 2016, we were like, hey, we need to move forward with this trail reconstruction project because the resource impacts are just terrible. So what can we do? We actually raised $50,000 and we purchased those 3 northernmost mining claims that you're showing with your claim there. So currently, CFI, our organization, owns the summit of Mount Chabonneau. We're holding on to that private land so that we can build this new trail, the red route. It's going to go through more stable terrain. It's going to be on talus, avoiding fragile plants. And we're going to cross it through our land, and then we're going to donate that land back to Forest Service, making it a larger network of publicly owned land. Last year, it may have been 2021, we actually purchased one of these claims there in the middle, which we're aiming to get a few more of those, which will help us go back and close and completely restore that old trail, transplant native vegetation, plant seeds, try to help that trail regrow and get back to its natural integrity.
That's so awesome. It's so cool that, going beyond even, working on trails and advocating for trails, but like taking the reins and buying land to keep these open and build them is just such a cool thing that your organization does.
Yeah, appreciate that.
All right, we have one other state of the 14ers initiative, and that's the current private land issues on Mount Lincoln and Democrat. As you can see here with this screenshot, this is all private land, as you can see, like denoted by this marker right here. And then you can see in the distance, Mount Democrat has very similar issues with private land. Jay, do you want to go into the details on that one?
Yeah, so this is a network of 4 different 14ers. There's Democrat, Cameron, Lincoln, and Mount Ross, which is always closed to use. It's privately owned. It's a patchwork of public land and private land, but mostly private land. And folks have been, allowed to hike on these peaks for years without any repercussions or closures or anything. In 2021, the landowner who owns most of this land decided that he could no longer take the liability issues. He was concerned after a court ruling, and he decided to close access to those peaks in 2021, which drastically reduced the amount of people that were going here, but also, reduced the economic vitality in local towns like the town of Alma, which is a really small town, but was getting a lot of visitors coming in and, stopping for beers and food at the grocery store and gas and that sort of thing. So they reopened in 2022, and we, along with the landowners and about 30 other organizations, tried to bring a bill to the Senate Judiciary Committee back in March that would change some wording on the Colorado recreational use statute, which protects landowners that are giving the public access to these places without charging them. That bill was voted down, and this landowner decided he wanted to close the lands again. So those have currently been closed all season. However, we've been working directly with the landowner on implementing a new feature that would allow people to log on and fill out a liability waiver before they go visit this place. Or if you drive to the trailhead, there will be paper slips coming in the next few weeks, hopefully, that you can sign your name and basically, tell the landowner that, hey, I'm going to go hike these peaks, but if I break my ankle or get stuck up here in a lightning storm, or I'm wandering off the trail, I'm not going to sue you for allowing me. So hopefully here in the next 2 weeks, we should hear that these lands are once again open, and that there's some liability protections for that landowner.
It's so cool that you fight both in the field and in our, in our government buildings for policy and everything like that on these.
Quite the experience. I got to testify in front of the committee. So
someday you're in the dirt, someday you're in the in the government building. So
a lot happens behind the scenes. I think most people know us for the trail work, but all this other research and private land advocacy and stuff, or public lands advocacy, is things that we're doing in the background.
Awesome. Cool. Well, the last important thing is how to support Colorado 14ers initiative.
Yeah. Donating, obviously cash is king. We can't do the work that we do without money. We're funded by a diverse range of entities. We get some state funding, a little bit of federal funding. The majority of our funds actually come from individual hikers. I think it's over 50% of our $2 million last year came from people that like what we do and love these places and want to give back. So donations are obviously kind of the most helpful way you can help out. We also offer volunteer opportunities. So this is a a volunteer here working on the Capitol Peak Trail project. We have single day and multi-day opportunities for people in the Front Range. We have, remote backcountry projects that are further out there. Should also highlight our Peak Steward program, which is basically the education component. You can sign up to be kind of a representative of our organization, and you get to go out and hike these peaks. And while you're out there, you talk to people about the importance of staying on trail and practicing leave no trace. And yeah, just being a good steward for the land. And then the easiest thing you can do if you don't want to donate sweat or money, you can just stay informed and help spread awareness. Obviously, we're on social media, Facebook and Instagram. We have a YouTube library, like I mentioned. And we've got email newsletters, which inform people all about private land advocacy, fundraising projects, and anything that we're doing. So yeah, better educating yourself and helping spread awareness of the work we're doing and the importance of it is super helpful.
Thank you so much for all the work that you do. And everything you do to fight for the mountains.
Yeah.
Get involved, everybody.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, we've made it to the end. We're going to try to do a couple questions before we go, but wanted to plug one last time. This is your link to save 30% and to fulfill part 1 of the donation portion of helping CFI, even if it's just a little bit here. So yeah, follow this link.
You didn't mention, and I think it's important because one of our smallest chunks of money comes from corporations, and onX Maps has now, for the second year in a row, given a grant to CFI. Both of those have been $15,000 each year. And you had employees from your staff that came out and worked on Mount Democrat last year. So onX is already giving back to us, and yeah, we're happy to be partnering with them. So don't write yourself off short.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, so here's this code. And then I also want to give a lot of time to the exciting giveaway. Thank you to the 100 people that have stuck around this far into our talking about peaks. So this is your reward. We are giving away this awesome Strafe Outerwear Scout jacket. It is awesome. It is lightweight. It'll go in your 14er bag every day. And the winner will select, not only there's a male and female option, but there's a handful of colors. And there's also the size of your choice. So this will be a jacket that you will use forever. Incredible company based in Aspen. You'll see people literally running on Capitol Peak with these jackets on. So great thing. And then we're also giving away 25 onX Backcountry hats. So your odds are pretty good to win something. Follow this code. Grace is putting that link in the bio as well in the chat there. So do that. And then we'll open it up for just a couple questions here. Again, I'll just keep this up so you guys can, you can continue to scan it. But, there's a lot of questions here. I want to be able to answer them all. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to our support team. Grace, also, if you could put, I think it's help@onxmaps.com. That would be a good place, because then they'll funnel the questions to either me or Brian, and we can start chatting offline here. So yeah, help@onxmaps.com. And Grace, thank you for all your help. You must have been typing very furiously during this program. So cool. All right, so we have a bunch of questions that came in. So this one's for you, Brian, on the CFI side.
Yep.
What makes a hiking trail sustainable?
Yeah, a variation of things, but mostly probably the grade of the trail, right? So as I mentioned, social trails, people were trying to get to the summit as quickly as they could. Most of these old 14er routes, if you've hiked them, they feel like you're going straight up the mountain. And if you look at that elevation profile on a lot of these old trails, they are going straight up the mountain. So putting in switchbacks, looking at the slope angle that you're going at, there's a multi-year process that happens for the planning of the route. Someone is from the Forest Service and our team are out there for years looking at, hey, where does the snow linger in the spring? Is the trail going to be crossing through areas where if there's still a lot of snow, we try and reroute around that. There's all the different botanists and biologists and archaeologists that come out and look at the trail line that we've created to say, hey, this plant that you're going to be crossing through is, indigenous to this mountain. When we were planning our route on North Elbert, the botanist that came out found a species of plant that had only been documented 30 times worldwide. So super rare plant. We can avoid those by moving the trail somewhere else. And then building it of durable materials. So I mentioned the soil is ancient, it's thousands of years old. So we implement a lot of things with rock. So we're building retention walls to hold in soil. We're building rock staircases, which make more durable surface. Instead of dirt, you're hiking on rock. So it can handle thousands, tens of thousands of footsteps every year.
That's awesome. And it's so cool to, see these trails like almost retroactively be built from everyone who's been hiking these for a while, and kind of the social trails that have formed into like, hey, let's build this in a way that can keep the natural order of things and also accommodate all the new people going up them.
Yeah.
I have a question for me here. So for backpacking, is there a way to see or get updates on what water sources are still available? So late summer, a lot of streams dry up. The Capitol Creek in this particular instance generally does run because it's fed from Capitol Lake. But there's a couple resources like in some of our, I think they're only bigger rivers though. We have like CFS gauges, but figuring out water logistics is obviously like really important when you're, when you're figuring out something like this. In this instance too, like I would probably walk over to Capitol Lake to fill up and gather a bunch of water before the summit push. But yeah, I would say like using the map to find where the rivers and streams are. Maybe even trying to use the recent imagery feature to see if the stream is big enough that you could actually see the water in it, which I don't even think Capitol Creek would be big enough for that. But yeah, that's definitely a thing, especially like if you're doing things like the rim to rim, and like some of the desert hikes, like those things dry up for sure. So, using a variety of sources and again, like getting the beta from people, like integrating the real world information and the stuff you're seeing on other groups and other resources and ingesting them into your onX Backcountry plan is generally a good idea. We also had a lot of questions about SOS capabilities and search and rescue. So right now we're limited pretty heavily by, cellular data in terms of communicating information out. So I'm hoping as phones get better and, the newest iPhone, you can now send SOS messages, via satellite with that, which I actually don't have one of those yet, but it could unlock a lot of potential for our app in the future. So I have excitement that the technology is going to get cool. One thing that I like to do when we talk about building the route and breaking it down and sharing it is the ease of sharing it, right? Like when you go and hike a 14er, you should always have somebody who's, sitting in somewhere, sitting at home. Like I text my mom all the time, like, I'm going out, I'm doing this. I'm not gonna have cell service for 3 days. Here's a link to the map. So like, if I don't text you Sunday night, like, where I am, right? Like that's another really good safety use of the onX Backcountry app, is not just saying, hey, I'm going to go hike this thing. It's saying, this is my play-by-play. And like, this is exactly like where I'm going to be camping. I'm going to campsite number 1. Like, this is where I'm going. This is my, you can actually build out your map so anybody can look at it and digest. And, somebody could also send that to a search and rescue team and help with that effort. But again, like those Garmin, InReach devices, game changing, like really, really essential, great things to carry with you at all times. Do you have anything to add, Ryan? Or
yeah, we used spot devices for years, and we made the switch last year. So all of our crews that are living and working in these remote base camps now have the Garmin InReach, which pairs with your phone, and it's unlocked so much more efficiency for our organization, just because we're able to send these messages and check on the crews daily, basically, and see if they need things to be brought up to them. Can't speak it highly enough for the Garmin InReach at the moment.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we are up at time. So thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, 14ers Initiative.
Yeah.
Thank you, Grace, for answering all the questions in the chat.
Thanks,
and yeah, stay tuned for the next one. We'll be doing these pretty regularly. So thanks for joining and thanks for sticking to the end. And for the jacket giveaway, I will pick the winners after the call today and you'll know tomorrow. So cross your fingers. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Get outside.
Cheers. See ya.